Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our presentation. Today, we're excited to introduce the course titled KIAR2, focusing on anti-corruption and integrity. Our goal is to build a generation with dignity, integrity, and a commitment to a corruption-free future. This session will cover the key principles of integrity, the importance of combating corruption, and how we can all contribute to creating a more transparent and honest society. Let's get started. Welcome to Module 3. In this part of the presentation, we're focusing on a very important message: abhor corruption and uphold pride. What does that really mean? Well, it's about making a clear stand against corruption in all its forms. Corruption can undermine trust, distort fairness, and damage our integrity as individuals and as a community. At the same time, upholding pride is about maintaining our dignity and self-respect. It's about doing the right thing, even when no one is watching, and taking pride in our honesty and ethical behavior. These two ideas are interconnected. They remind us that integrity isn't just about avoiding wrongdoings. It's about actively promoting a culture of pride in our values. This module ties into the overall theme of building a responsible and ethical environment, where everyone plays a role in fostering trust and respect. So, as we go through this, keep in mind that standing against corruption and embracing pride are essential for sustainable progress and for earning the respect of others. Now, on this slide, we see that various international organizations have provided their own definitions of corruption. This highlights just how complex and multifaceted the concept really is. When we talk about corruption, we're referring to actions that deviate from accepted norms and laws, often involving abuse of power for personal gain. The key point here is that different organizations might emphasize different aspects. Some focus on bribery, others on misuse of authority, or even deception. These varying definitions show us that corruption isn't just one simple act. It's a spectrum of behaviors that undermine trust and integrity in institutions. Understanding these diverse perspectives helps us see how corruption impacts not just individual cases, but entire systems, which ties directly into our overall theme of tackling this pervasive issue effectively. Today, I want to talk about a serious issue that undermines trust and integrity in public service: the misuse of public power, office, or authority for private benefit. This is a wide-ranging problem that can take many forms. For example, bribery, where someone offers money or favors to influence decisions. Extortion, which involves threatening or coercing others to get what they want. Influence peddling, where individuals leverage their connections to secure advantages improperly. Nepotism or favoritism shown to relatives, often at the expense of fairness. Fraud, which involves deception for personal gain. Speed money or quick bribes to facilitate faster processing of official matters. And of course, embezzlement, where public officials illegally divert funds for personal use. All of these behaviors corrupt the very foundation of good governance. They distort fair decision-making processes and harm the public trust. This slide highlights that such misuse not only damages institutions, but also erodes the confidence citizens have in their leaders. Understanding these forms of misconduct helps us recognize the importance of transparency, accountability, and ethical conduct in public service. It's a reminder that authority should serve the public good, not personal interests, and that safeguarding integrity is essential for a healthy, functioning society. Let's take a moment to focus on a critical issue: the abuse of public office for private gain. This occurs when individuals in positions of power use their authority not for the public good, but for personal benefit. It's a form of corruption that undermines trust in institutions and hampers societal progress. Most importantly, it highlights the importance of integrity and accountability in leadership. When public officials prioritize personal interests over their duties, it erodes public confidence and damages the fabric of good governance. This concept ties directly into the overall theme of our presentation: promoting transparency, ethical behavior, and strong oversight to prevent such abuses from happening. Recognizing and addressing this issue is key to building a fair and just society where public resources serve the common good. Misuse of entrusted power for private gain is a serious issue that can undermine trust and damage organizations. When someone in a position of authority uses their power for personal benefit, it not only affects their reputation, but also harms the integrity of the entire system. It's important to remember that such actions hurt everyone who depends on the honesty and ethical conduct of those in leadership roles. Ultimately, maintaining integrity is essential to building a trustworthy environment where everyone can feel confident that decisions are made fairly and responsibly. This slide highlights a core principle of our overall theme: the importance of ethical behavior in leadership and the profound impact it has on our collective success. Let's talk about bribery, which involves offering, promising, giving, accepting, or even soliciting an advantage as a way to influence actions. The key idea here is that these actions are meant to induce someone to do something that is illegal, unethical, or a breach of trust. Now, when we look at active bribery, this is when an employee of a company is the one offering, promising, or giving the advantage. It's proactive. They're the ones initiating the bribe. On the other hand, passive bribery is when an employee requests, agrees to receive, or actually accepts an advantage. Here, the employee is on the receiving end, often in a position of power or trust. Both forms are serious and undermine integrity, but understanding these distinctions helps us recognize and prevent corrupt practices within organizations. This ties back to our overall focus on maintaining ethical standards and compliance. When we talk about corruption, it's really about the intention behind the act. The slide states that to be considered corrupt, a person must knowingly do something that is wrong, and do so with evil intent. It's not just about the act itself, but also about the mindset or purpose behind it. Think of it this way: if someone purposely does something that the law forbids, and they do it with a guilty or malicious intent, then that act falls under the scope of corruption. It's important because the law looks at why someone did something, not just what they did. This is why, as the slide emphasizes, corruption is fundamentally a question of intention. If the circumstances reveal that the act or omission was driven by an evil intention or a guilty mind, then that person can be held liable under the law, regardless of other factors. The case of PPV Dato Harun bin Idris, as referenced here, is a key example where the court clarified that the mental state, that evil or guilty intention, is crucial in establishing corruption. So, in the broader context of this presentation, understanding that corruption involves intent helps us see why the law is so focused on both the act and the mindset behind it. It's about ensuring that wrongful acts are linked to wrongful intentions, making accountability clearer. When we talk about corruption, one of the key aspects to understand is the act of receiving or giving gratification, which is essentially a bribe. This usually happens in exchange for doing something related to official duties. So, imagine a situation where a public official accepts money or favors to overlook a violation or to expedite a process. That's a classic example of corruption. It's important to realize that this exchange undermines integrity and fairness in public service. It distorts the true purpose of the role and can have serious consequences for governance and public trust. Overall, this slide highlights how such illicit exchanges are at the core of corrupt practices, which we need to be vigilant against to promote transparency and accountability. Let's take a closer look at the elements of corruption. First, we have the bribe giver, the person who offers something of value. Then there's the bribe receiver, the individual who accepts it. Next, we have gratification, which can take various forms: money, gifts, favors, or other benefits. These are the tangible or intangible things exchanged in the process. The purpose of the bribe is often to secure a favor or benefit in return. Whether it's a decision, action, or influence, that's the core reason behind the transaction. Now, an essential concept here is mens rea, or malicious intent. This refers to the deliberate intention to commit a corrupt act. In fact, mens rea is often the most challenging element to prove during investigations, because it involves establishing the mindset or intent of the parties involved. Understanding these elements helps us grasp how corruption occurs and underscores the importance of thorough investigations to uncover not just the act, but the intent behind it. Let's look at this example to understand a key point about corruption offenses. Imagine a father giving his son RM50 to go to school. According to the law, this is not considered a corruption offense. The reason for this is quite straightforward. There's no mens rea or malicious intent involved in this gift. In other words, the father isn't trying to influence or bribe his son. He's simply giving him money for a legitimate purpose. This example helps us see that not all gifts or payments are automatically corruptions. The intention behind the act is what truly matters in determining whether it's a crime. So, when we talk about corruption, understanding the presence or absence of malicious intent is crucial. This ties back to the overall theme of our presentation, which emphasizes the importance of intent and context in defining corrupt practices. In Malaysia, corruption is known by several different names, which often reflect the local context and perceptions around it. These alternative terms can sometimes carry different connotations, highlighting how corruption is viewed within society. Recognizing these names helps us understand the cultural nuances and the ways in which corruption is discussed or perceived locally. Throughout this presentation, we see that corruption isn't just a global issue. It manifests uniquely in each country, influenced by language, culture, and societal attitudes. So, understanding these local names gives us a deeper insight into the challenges Malaysia faces in combating corruption and the importance of culturally aware anti-corruption strategies. Let's take a look at some notable examples of corruption from around the world, highlighting how widespread and varied these issues can be. First, in Italy, we have Tangentopoli, which translates to Bribe City. This was a major scandal in the 1990s where acts of corruption within the Italian political system were uncovered, revealing a widespread network of kickbacks and illicit deals. It really shook the country's political landscape and underscored how deeply corruption can infiltrate governance. Moving to Japan, there's the Black Mist scandal, which involved match fixing in professional baseball between 1969 and 1971. This scandal not only damaged the sport's integrity, but also highlighted how corruption can extend into entertainment and sports industries, affecting public trust. In Uganda, we encounter air supply, a term that describes payments made even when goods are not supplied or services are not provided. This kind of corruption impacts business transactions and hampers economic development because it distorts fair trade practices. Next, in Nigeria, the number 419 is well known. It refers to the section of the Nigerian Criminal Code that deals with fraud. This number has become synonymous with scam operations, especially online, and underscores how legal frameworks can sometimes become associated with specific types of criminal activity. In France, we see laissez-faire, which refers to illegal business transactions. These can include bribery, embezzlement, or other forms of corporate misconduct that undermine fair commerce and trust in the market. Finally, in the UK, there's the term sleaze. It describes dishonest and immoral acts, particularly by civil servants or public officials. This kind of misconduct erodes public confidence and highlights the importance of integrity in public service. All of these examples show how corruption takes many forms across different cultures and sectors. They remind us that regardless of where it occurs, corruption can have serious consequences for society, politics, and the economy. Recognizing these patterns helps us understand the global challenge of fighting corruption at every level. Now let's look at some of the different terms used for corruption overseas. In Indonesian, we have pungli, which is a blend of the words for collection and wild, implying how this kind of corruption can be chaotic or uncontrolled. Moving to Hokkien, there's Louis coffee, which is quite literal, referring to money exchanged for services, similar to a tip or a bribe. In Japan, you'll hear terms like zoi, wero, or suwai, all of which involve giving money to do something that's actually prohibited, so essentially, paying to bypass rules or regulations. Then, in Mandarin Chinese, there's charqin, which translates to tea money. This phrase hints at small payments made to smooth over bureaucratic processes or gain favors. Finally, in China, the term then wu combines greedy and impurity, emphasizing the corrupt and morally questionable nature of these practices. All these terms reveal how corruption, though expressed differently across cultures, fundamentally involves paying for influence or special treatment, something that ties into our overall discussion of corruption's global presence and its various manifestations. This slide doesn't contain enough information. That's why we're moving to the next slide. Corruption is a serious crime, and I want us to really understand the gravity of this issue. When we talk about corruption, we're not just dealing with minor misconduct or unethical behavior. It's a fundamental crime that undermines trust, damages institutions, and hampers development. Now, some might think of corruption as just a social problem, something that affects our communities or social interactions. But that's actually not quite accurate. It's much more than that. Corruption is a crime with legal consequences, and it has very real, tangible impacts on our societies. Recognizing it as a crime helps us understand the need for strict enforcement and accountability. So, throughout this presentation, I want us to keep in mind that corruption is not just a social nuisance. It is a serious violation of the law that must be addressed decisively. Because of corruption, many great civilizations and governments have faced downfall. For instance, the Roman Empire, the Ottoman Empire, and the Ming Dynasty all collapsed partly due to widespread corruption that destabilized their institutions and eroded public trust. Similarly, the fall of the Malay Sultanate of Malacca was driven by corruption among the king and his officials, which weakened the sultanate's control and led to its decline. On a more recent note, we've seen the fall of several nationalist governments, such as those led by Chiang Kai-shek in China, Richard Nixon in America, Ferdinand Marcos in the Philippines, and President Mobutu in Zaire. In each case, corruption played a significant role in undermining their authority and legitimacy, ultimately leading to their downfall. These examples highlight how corruption can have far-reaching consequences, not just destabilizing governments, but also contributing to the collapse of entire empires and states. It's a powerful reminder of the importance of integrity and transparency in leadership, especially when considering the overall theme of how governance shapes history. According to Transparency International, the total annual loss caused by corrupt practices worldwide amounts to a staggering $2.6 trillion. That's an enormous figure that really highlights how widespread and damaging corruption can be across different sectors and countries. This loss impacts economies, hampers development, and undermines trust in institutions. As we consider the broader impact of corruption, understanding these enormous financial costs helps us grasp why tackling corruption is so crucial for sustainable growth and good governance. It's a reminder of the immense resources that are lost each year due to unethical practices, and the importance of implementing strong anti-corruption measures globally. Let's take a closer look at the cost estimates here. For each unit, we're talking about a range, around $500 million per unit in some cases. That's a significant investment, and it highlights the scale of these projects. On the other hand, there are units estimated at roughly $150 million each. This difference in costs is important because it reflects the complexity, size, or perhaps the technology involved in different types of units. Understanding these figures helps us grasp the financial scope and the strategic planning needed for these projects. Overall, these numbers are crucial because they inform our budgeting, risk assessment, and decision-making processes. They underscore how substantial investments are required, but also how varied the costs can be depending on the specific unit or project. This is a key part of our broader discussion on project feasibility and financial planning. This slide doesn't contain enough information. That's why we're moving to the next slide. This slide doesn't contain enough information. That's why we're moving to the next slide. Pada slide inai, kita melihat sebuah pertanyaan yang sangat penting, Yedu tenteng keberedan korupsi dalam pelianan awam. Di sini, kita menempilkan pendapat datuk seri azam baki, yang menjabat sebagai timbalan kedua pesaruja, operasi. Pada tanggal 8 Mac 2017, beliau mengungkapkan sesuatu yang cukup serius. Beliau mengatakan bahwa gejala korupsi dan penyalahgunaan kuasa di kalangan pegawai awam telah menunjukkan tanda-tanda yang serius selama 10 tahun terakhir. Lebih membimbangkan lagi, beliau menyampaikan bahwa jika tindakan tidak diambil segera, tren ini berpotensi terus meningkat. Jadi, ini menunjukkan bahwa korupsi di sektor awam bukanlah masalah kecil, melainkan sesuatu yang memerlukan perhatian serius dan tindakan cepat. Ini berkaitan langsung dengan tema utama kita tentang pentingnya integriti dan ketulusan dalam perkhidmatan awam untuk memastikan keberkesanan dan keadilan dalam sistem pemerintahan kita. According to the Global Financial Integrity Report from 2017, a significant portion of illicit financial flows comes through illegal channels, and a good part of this is linked to corrupt practices. Now, to put this into perspective, Malaysia lost around RM18 trillion between 2005 and 2014 due to these illegal financial activities. This figure is staggering and highlights how corruption and illegal financial flows can have a profound impact on a nation's economy. It emphasizes the importance of strengthening our financial systems and fighting corruption to protect our country's resources and ensure sustainable growth. Let's talk about the corruption situation in Malaysia, which we can gauge through the Corruption Perception Index, or CPI. The government's goal is clear. They aim for Malaysia to be ranked in the top 25 countries on this index. During the MADANI Empowering People Economy launch ceremony on July 27, 2023, the Prime Minister, YAB Datuk Seri Anwar Ibrahim, emphasized this target. If we look at the recent data, in 2023, Malaysia ranked 57th out of 180 countries with a score of 50%. Over the past few years, we've seen some fluctuation. In 2022, the ranking was 61st with a score of 47%, and in 2021, it was 62nd with 48%. Going further back, in 2020, Malaysia was at 57th with a slightly higher score of 51%, and in 2019, it was 51st with 53%. Overall, this shows that while there has been some improvement, Malaysia still has significant room to grow. The goal is to continue making progress so that, in the future, Malaysia can join the top 25 nations with the highest integrity and lowest perception of corruption. Achieving this will require sustained efforts and a clear focus on anti-corruption initiatives. Corruption, it's something that can affect all of us, and the truth is, anyone can get trapped in it. Whether it's individuals, organizations, or even entire systems, corruption can creep in quietly and pull us down if we're not careful. It's important to recognize that no one is immune. It's a risk that's always present. That's why understanding how corruption operates and being vigilant is so crucial. When we talk about integrity and transparency, we're actually talking about protecting ourselves and our communities from falling into these traps. So, staying aware and committed to ethical practices is key to avoiding corruption and ensuring we stay on the right path. Now, let's explore why individuals can sometimes get caught up in corruption and misuse of power. One key factor is the lack of integrity, which can make people more susceptible to unethical behavior. Often, there's a trait among some individuals who like to be celebrated or recognized, and this desire can lead them to seek shortcuts or illicit gains. Additionally, some are motivated by a desire to profit easily, without considering the broader consequences. Organizational culture also plays a significant role, especially when it involves the giving of gifts or favors, which can create an environment where corruption is normalized. We also see evil collusion between officials and contractors, where both parties work together to benefit at the expense of fairness or legality. Contractors, for example, might try to establish good relations with certain officials to gain advantages, sometimes starting with small parties or gifts as a way to build trust. Another tactic used by contractors is having a hidden agenda, acting in a way that appears innocent on the surface, but serves their own interests secretly. These individuals often test the waters with bribery repeatedly, trying to see how far they can go before facing consequences. It's important to recognize that while people can successfully reject corruption for a time, it's not always sustainable indefinitely. This whole cycle highlights how complex and subtle the temptations of corruption can be, especially when personal traits and organizational culture come together. Ultimately, understanding these factors helps us see why maintaining integrity and vigilance is so crucial in fighting misuse of power. Today, I want to dive into understanding the reasons why an individual might commit corruption, focusing on the corruptor's mindset. It's important to recognize that corruption doesn't happen in a vacuum. There are underlying psychological and contextual factors at play. First, we need to consider that some individuals might see corruption as a quick solution to their problems or a way to achieve personal gain. This mindset often stems from a belief that the system is unfair or that opportunities for success are limited without bending the rules. Another key point is the influence of temptation and perceived benefits. When the potential rewards outweigh the perceived risks or consequences, some may rationalize their actions. This is especially true if they think they won't get caught or if they believe that everyone else is doing it. Additionally, the corruptor's mindset can be driven by a sense of entitlement or a belief that they deserve more than what is available through legitimate means. Sometimes, personal greed or a desire for status and power can cloud judgment, making corruption seem like a justified or necessary step. It's also vital to connect this to the overall theme of our presentation. Understanding these mindsets helps us develop better strategies to prevent corruption. By recognizing the thought patterns and motivations behind corrupt behavior, we can address the root causes more effectively and foster a culture of integrity. Let's talk about the get away once, get away forever mindset. This is something I see often among those involved in corruption. It's like a fleeting sense of relief, but it rarely leads to true freedom. It's usually driven by a need to escape immediate problems, but in reality, it can trap you in a cycle of ongoing issues. Many individuals become victims of circumstance, feeling that their only option is to act out of fear of being isolated or left behind. This sense of isolation can push people toward making decisions they wouldn't normally consider, like accepting bribes. So why do some take bribes? Well, often it's driven by ambition and greed. They see it as a way to gain power, wealth, or status quickly. But it's important to remember that leadership by example is crucial here. Leaders who set the right example promote integrity and transparency. However, frustration syndrome also plays a big role. When people feel stuck or powerless, they might resort to corruption as a way to cope or to get ahead. All of these points tie into the broader mindset of corruption offenders. It's a complex mix of personal motivations, environmental factors, and psychological influences. Understanding this mindset is key if we want to address and prevent corruption effectively. So, why do some people take bribes? Well, one common reason is the belief that if I don't accept it, someone else will. It's almost like a competition or a game of chance. If I refuse, maybe I'll lose out and someone else will step in and take the opportunity. In today's modern world, it's become increasingly difficult to say no. Social and professional pressures can push us towards accepting things we might not agree with initially. And it's important to remember, we might be able to say no today, but tomorrow could be different. We might feel more pressured or tempted. Another key point is that often, we didn't ask for the bribe in the first place. It's the other person who offers it. That can make it seem less like a personal choice and more like a reaction to external pressure or temptation. These thoughts reveal some of the mindset behind corruption, how it's driven by perception, social norms, and the environment we're in. Recognizing this helps us understand how these attitudes develop and why combating corruption requires changing these mindsets at their core. When we look at the mindset of corruption offenders, we often see a common thread. They tend to be ambitious and greedy. They have this strong desire to improve their financial situation, sometimes driven by envy or the aspiration to be as successful as others. For example, I've heard someone say, "I want to be rich like my former officer." That desire to match or surpass someone else's wealth can push individuals toward corrupt practices. They might think, "He can be rich, so why can't I?" This shows a mindset where the possibility of success, even if gained unethically, feels justified. And then there's the notion of opportunity. Opportunity only comes knocking once. This phrase reveals how some offenders see corruption as a rare chance, a once-in-a-lifetime shot that they shouldn't let slip away. Overall, these attitudes highlight how ambition and greed, combined with a perception of limited chances, can distort decision-making and justify corrupt actions. It's important for us to understand this mindset so we can address the root causes and promote integrity. Let's take a moment to understand the mindset of corruption offenders. Often, they see themselves as victims of circumstance and are driven by fear of being isolated. For example, they might think, "If I don't accept bribes, my friends or colleagues will exclude me." This fear of social rejection or losing their support network can be very powerful. In many cases, they justify their actions by convincing themselves that accepting corruption makes their lives easier. They believe that by going along with corrupt practices, they can avoid conflict, hardship, or loneliness. This highlights how deeply rooted the fear of isolation can be in influencing unethical behavior. It's important to recognize that these feelings can cloud judgment and lead people down a path where they prioritize avoiding discomfort over doing what's right. Understanding this mindset helps us see why corruption persists. It's not always about greed, but often about fear and the desire to belong. Addressing these underlying fears is key to fostering integrity and change. Let's talk about the mindset of corruption offenders and the importance of leadership by example. When we see that the boss is doing it, it creates a powerful influence. People tend to follow what they see their leaders doing. If the leader is taking more than they should, why should anyone else feel compelled to be the good guy and act differently? It's a ripple effect. Leadership sets the tone for everyone else. That's why integrity at the top is so crucial. If leaders demonstrate honesty and accountability, it encourages others to do the same. But if they don't, it can foster a culture where corruption seems acceptable or even inevitable. So, it's vital to remember that leadership by example is one of the strongest ways to shape the mindset of the entire team or organization. All right, let's talk about the mindset of corruption offenders. You might have heard the phrase, "Get away once, get away forever." This really captures how some individuals think about their actions. They might have gotten away with corruption once, twice, or even 3 times, and somehow they believe that as long as they haven't been caught, everything is fine. It's like they develop this false sense of security, thinking they can continue without consequences. But what's really concerning is the attitude that if they are caught, they might try to shift the blame entirely. They may even threaten to expose all the wrongdoings within their department to protect themselves. This mindset is dangerous because it fuels ongoing corruption. It's important to recognize these patterns because they reveal a lot about how offenders think and operate. Understanding this helps us see why prevention and accountability are so crucial in tackling corruption effectively. Let's talk about the mindset of corruption offenders, specifically the frustration syndrome. Many times I see people feeling it's unfair for them. They work hard, they do their best, yet they see others getting ahead unfairly. For example, someone might think, "I work hard but I get nothing, yet that person who is lazy but charming seems to get all the rewards." It's a common feeling, working honestly but feeling unnoticed or unrecognized. This frustration can lead to what's called the frustration syndrome, where these negative feelings build up and sometimes push individuals towards corrupt practices. The key point here is that working with integrity, even if it doesn't make you rich overnight, is still the right path. Because in the long run, true success comes from honesty, not shortcuts or unfair advantages. So, understanding this mindset helps us see why some might be tempted to compromise their integrity. But it's important to remember, the real value lies in maintaining honesty, regardless of the immediate rewards. Today, I want to address a critical aspect of the mindset of corruption offenders, which is often driven by the need for survival. You know, many of us have heard colleagues or even ourselves saying, "Nowadays, I have to give a bribe to get a project." It become almost a norm in certain situations, which is quite concerning. The core issue here is the low salary of government servants. When the pay is not enough to cover basic living expenses, especially in urban areas, it pushes people to look for alternative income sources. Living in a town or city, with its higher costs, makes it even harder to make ends meet on a government salary alone. So what happens? Well, side income becomes a solution, sometimes through corrupt means, because it feels like the only way to survive and support one's family. This mindset, where survival is prioritized over integrity, fuels the cycle of corruption and makes it seem justifiable in the moment. Understanding this mindset is crucial because it highlights the need for systemic change, addressing not just the corruption itself, but also the underlying economic pressures that drive people toward it. Only then can we hope to create a culture of integrity and fairness. Corruption has very bad consequences for individuals, families, communities, economies, and countries. It affects everyone in some way or another. When corruption occurs, it erodes trust and hampers development. It's important to understand that corruption does not only involve giving and receiving bribes. There are different ways corruption can manifest. According to the MACC Act 2009, there are 4 main corruption offenses. Recognizing these helps us understand the full scope of corruption and how to fight it effectively. As we conclude, remember that fighting corruption is essential for building a fair and just society. We all have a role to play in promoting integrity and transparency. Thank you for your attention. Let's take a moment to focus on the activity itself. This slide emphasizes the importance of engaging actively with the material. When we talk about activity, we're referring to the ways in which you can apply what you've learned, practice new skills, or participate in discussions. It's not just about passively absorbing information, but about doing something with it. This active engagement helps deepen understanding and retention. For example, participating in exercises, reflecting on questions, or applying concepts to real-world scenarios can make a significant difference. Remember, the key point here is that activity reinforces learning and connects theory to practice. Throughout this presentation, we've highlighted how engagement drives success. So, I encourage you to think about ways you can incorporate activity into your own learning process. By doing so, you'll not only retain more information, but also develop the skills needed to implement what you've learned effectively. This slide doesn't contain enough information. That's why we're moving to the next slide. This slide doesn't contain enough information. That's why we're moving to the next slide.